Officer, you just walked through a closed gate. This is private property. I'm asking you to leave.
Don't tell me how to do my job. Keep your hands where I can see them.
My hands are visible. I haven't committed a crime.
You don't have a warrant.
You're being non-compliant. Step back now.
I'm a black man in my own backyard asserting my rights. That's not a crime.
The gate latch didn't just click. It rattled with the violence of an intruder who believed he owned the world. And for Marcus Thorne, that sound was the first crack in the foundation of his peaceful afternoon. It was 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, the kind of afternoon that retirees in the suburbs dream about. The sun was high and unrepentant, baking the scent of freshly cut fescue and damp mulch into the air. Marcus, 55 years old and built like the retired heavy machinery operator he was, stood near his hydrangeas. He was a man who appreciated lines, the straight lines of his mowed lawn, the solid lines of his property fence, and the invisible lines of respect that held a community together. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand, admiring the deep green of his sanctuary. He had worked 30 years to pay for this silence. Then came the rattle. Marcus turned slowly, his boots crunching softly on the gravel path he had laid himself. The wooden privacy fence that surrounded his backyard was 6 feet tall, designed specifically to keep the world out and his tranquility in. The gate was closed. It wasn't locked, a mistake he would later regret, but it was latched, a universal symbol of a private boundary. The gate swung open, hitting the fence post with a dull thud. Stepping through the breach was a man who looked like he was at war with the suburbs. Officer Kyle Ricketts was young, perhaps 28, with the sort of jawline that suggested he spent more time in the gym than in the law library. His uniform was tight aggressively so, and his sunglasses hid his eyes, stripping away any humanity and leaving only the reflection of the man he was invading. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He simply walked onto the grass, his hand resting casually, almost affectionately, on the grip of his holstered service weapon. Marcus stood his ground. He didn't drop his gardening shears, nor did he raise them. He simply watched the intruder. In his 55 years, Marcus had learned that panic was a luxury he couldn't afford, especially as a black man in America facing a badge. He took a breath, expanding his broad chest, and waited for the explanation that surely had to come. "Afternoon," Marcus said. His voice was a deep rumble, calm but devoid of warmth. It wasn't a greeting, it was a prompt. Officer Ricketts didn't stop walking until he was 10 feet inside the property line. He looked around the yard, scanning the windows of the house, the tool shed, and finally Marcus. He chewed gum with an open mouth, a rhythmic display of disrespect. "You live here?" Ricketts asked. "No, sir. No apology. Just an interrogation." "I do," Marcus replied, his eyes narrowing slightly against the glare. "The question is, why are you here? I didn't call for help, and I don't have any business with the city." Ricketts smirked, a quick twitch of the lips. "We got a report. Noise complaint. Disturbance in the area. Checking the perimeter." Marcus looked around the silent yard. The only noise was the distant hum of an air conditioner unit 3 houses down. "Noise complaint. It's 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, officer. The loudest thing out here is the birds. And even if there was a noise, that doesn't give you the right to walk through my closed gate without a warrant." The air shifted. It became heavier, charged with static. Ricketts stopped chewing his gum. He tilted his head, the sunglasses staring blankly at Marcus. He clearly wasn't used to homeowners knowing the rulebook. To Ricketts, the badge was an all-access pass, a master key to any door he chose to open. "I don't need a warrant to check a perimeter when I'm in hot pursuit or investigating a disturbance." Ricketts lied. The lie was smooth practiced. "I need you to step away from those bushes and keep your hands where I can see them." "My hands are right here," Marcus said, holding them out slightly to his sides, palms open, shears still in the left hand but pointed at the ground. "And this is my property. You are trespassing. Unless you can produce a warrant signed by a judge or tell me exactly who you are chasing, I am asking you to leave my property, immediately." The silence that followed was dangerous. It was the silence of a man with power realizing he was being told no by a man he deemed beneath him. Ricketts took a step forward, crossing the invisible line between conversation and confrontation. The distance between the two men was closing not just physically, but ideologically. On one side stood Marcus, rooted in the soil he owned, backed by the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which protected citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. On the other side stood Officer Ricketts, fueled by qualified immunity and a bruised ego operating on the belief that compliance was mandatory regardless of the law. "You're making this difficult," Ricketts said, his voice dropping an octave, aiming for intimidation. "I'm conducting an investigation. You telling me to leave constitutes obstruction." Marcus didn't flinch. He had raised 3 children and managed construction crews with men twice as rough as this officer. He knew the difference between a lawful order and a power trip. "I am asserting my rights, officer. There is no obstruction in demanding you respect the law. This is the curtilage of my home. It is protected. You have no probable cause to be here." Ricketts scoffed, stepping off the grass and onto the patio pavers. "Lawyer, huh? You a lawyer?" "I'm a citizen," Marcus corrected him. "And I'm a taxpayer who pays your salary. Now for the second time, I'm asking you to leave my yard. If you have questions, you can go to the front door, ring the bell, and if I choose to answer, we can talk. But you do not get to roam my backyard like it's a public park." Ricketts' hand tightened on his belt, just inches from his gun. It was a subtle threat, a reminder of who held the lethal force. "Drop the weapon!" Ricketts barked, suddenly pointing at the gardening shears in Marcus's hand. It was a tactic. Marcus knew it instantly. De-escalation was not in Ricketts's vocabulary. He was trying to create a threat where none existed to justify his presence. "It's a pair of pruning shears," Marcus said, his voice steady, though his heart was beginning to hammer against his ribs. He slowly, agonizingly slowly, bent his knees and placed the shears on the grass. He stood back up, showing his empty palms. "I am unarmed. I am on my own property. You are the aggressor here." "I decide who the aggressor is," Ricketts snapped. "Turn around. Put your hands on the fence." "For what?" Marcus demanded, his voice rising for the first time. "Am I under arrest? What is the crime being black in my own backyard?" "I said turn around," Ricketts yelled, abandoning the pretense of the noise complaint. This was personal now. He had been challenged, and his authority was fragile enough that it couldn't withstand the weight of a simple question. Marcus remained planted. "I will not. I have done nothing wrong. I am asking you for your badge number and your supervisor's name. You are violating my civil rights." "You want my badge number?" Ricketts sneered, stepping within striking distance, entering Marcus's personal space aggressively. The smell of stale coffee and aggressive cologne wafted off him. "I'll give you a ride to the station. You can read it there." "I'm not going anywhere with you unless I'm under arrest," Marcus stated. "And if you arrest me without cause, you are going to regret it. Not today, maybe, but you will regret it." Ricketts laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound. "Is that a threat? Are you threatening an officer?" "It's a promise of litigation," Marcus said. "Leave my yard." The air was so tight it felt like it could snap. Ricketts was vibrating with adrenaline. He looked at Marcus, a calm older man who refused to cower, and he didn't see a citizen. He saw a target. He saw defiance. And in Ricketts's world, defiance had to be crushed. He reached for his radio, his eyes never leaving Marcus. "Dispatch, I've got a non-compliant male here at 4402 Oak Street. Possible suspect from the disturbance call. He's being combative." "Combative?" Marcus repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "I haven't moved an inch." "Keep your mouth shut!" Ricketts screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. The mask of the professional officer had completely slipped, revealing the bully underneath. He was looking for a reason, any reason, to put his hands on Marcus, and he was about to manufacture one. The back door of the house slid open with a heavy whoosh, breaking the suffocating tension in the yard. Brenda Thorne stepped out. At 52, she was the steel spine of the Thorne family. She wore a simple floral blouse and slacks, but it was what she held in her hand that changed the dynamic of the entire confrontation, a smartphone held high, horizontal, and steady. "I am streaming this live to the cloud, officer." Brenda's voice rang out sharp and clear. She didn't scream. She projected. She stood safely on the threshold of her home, her eyes locked on the young man threatening her husband. Ricketts flinched. The presence of a camera usually forced a reset, a moment where an officer remembered the world was watching. But Ricketts was too far gone, too deep in the adrenaline tunnel. The camera didn't make him cautious. It made him furious. "Put the phone down, ma'am," Ricketts shouted, pointing a finger at her. "Step back inside. This is an active crime scene." "A crime scene?" Brenda retorted, zooming in on Ricketts's face. "The only crime happening here is trespassing. That is my husband. He has heart trouble. If you touch him, you better be ready to explain it to a judge." "Brenda, stay back," Marcus warned gently, his eyes still fixed on Ricketts. He didn't want her caught in the crossfire of Ricketts's temper. "I'm not going anywhere, Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly but her hand rock steady. "Officer, state your reason for being here. I want it on the recording." Ricketts looked between the two of them. He was losing control of the narrative. He needed to end this, and his training, or lack thereof, told him that the only way to end a conflict was to dominate it. "He fits the description." Ricketts yelled a generic excuse that meant nothing and everything. "And now he's refusing lawful orders. Ma'am, if you don't go inside, you're going to be arrested for interference." "I am on my own porch," Brenda fired back. "I have a First Amendment right to record you in the performance of your duties. I am not interfering. I am documenting." Ricketts turned his back on Brenda, focusing his rage entirely on Marcus. He couldn't arrest the woman on the porch without storming the house, but the man in the yard was within reach. The camera was recording his failure to command respect, and his ego couldn't take the hit. He had to win. "Last chance," Ricketts hissed at Marcus. "Get on the ground." "No," Marcus said. "I have bad knees, and I have done nothing wrong. I will not get on the ground like a criminal in my own garden." "That's it," Ricketts muttered. The escalation was irrational. There was no weapon, no flight risk, no active danger. But Ricketts was operating on a script in his head where he was the hero and Marcus was the villain. He lunged. "Marcus!" Brenda screamed, the phone shaking for the first time. Ricketts didn't use a technique from the manual. He didn't attempt a control hold. He simply tackled Marcus. He threw his younger, heavier body against Marcus's 55-year-old frame. The impact was sickening, a grunt of air leaving lungs the sound of boots slipping on grass. Marcus didn't fight back. He knew that if he raised a hand to defend himself, Ricketts would shoot him. It was a terrifying calculus that every black man of his generation had performed 1,000 times. Survival over pride. Marcus let himself fall, his shoulder slamming into the hard earth, the smell of the grass he loved now pressed against his face. "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" Ricketts screamed a mantra for the recording, creating a false audio narrative to cover his physical aggression. "I am not resisting," Marcus gasped. The wind knocked out of him. "I'm down! I'm down!" Brenda was screaming now, a primal sound of fear and outrage. "He's not fighting you! Get off him! You're hurting him!" But Ricketts was in the zone. He jammed a knee into Marcus's lower back, twisting Marcus's left arm up at an angle that tested the limits of the rotator cuff. The pain was blinding white light behind Marcus's eyes. The garden, once a place of peace, had become a cage. Marcus Thorne's face was pressed into the dirt of his own lawn, the grit scraping against his cheek. Above him, Officer Ricketts was a weight of pure malice, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his chin onto Marcus's neck. Give me your other hand, Ricketts roared, though Marcus's right arm was trapped under his own body due to the tackle. Stop reaching! Stop reaching! I can't move it, Marcus groaned through gritted teeth. You're on top of me. Let me move so I can give you the arm. Ricketts didn't listen. He perceived the trapped arm not as physics, but as defiance. He delivered a short, sharp strike to Marcus's ribs with his closed fist. It was a compliance strike, they called it. To Marcus, it felt like a hammer breaking a slat of wood. A sharp crack echoed in his chest. Oh, God, Marcus wheezed. You like that? Ricketts whispered low enough that perhaps the camera wouldn't catch it, but loud enough for Marcus to hear the sadism. He yanked Marcus's right arm free and slapped the metal cuff onto the wrist. He ratcheted it tight, too tight, pinching the skin and cutting off circulation. Then he grabbed the left wrist and locked them together behind Marcus's back. You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest, Ricketts recited, panting. He stood up, grabbing Marcus by the back of his shirt and the chain of the handcuffs hauling the older man to his feet. Marcus stumbled, his equilibrium gone, his ribs screaming in agony with every breath. He looked up toward the porch. Brenda was crying, but the phone was still up. She was the witness. She was the lifeline. Don't say anything else, Marcus, Brenda called out, her voice cracking. I called the firm. Mr. Sterling is on his way to the precinct. Don't say a word to him. Ricketts glared at Brenda. Back inside or you're next? You have his name, Brenda said, her voice turning to ice. Officer Ricketts, I have your face. I have your badge number, and I have every second of this. Ricketts shoved Marcus forward, forcing him to walk toward the gate Ricketts had violated minutes earlier. Move it! The walk to the patrol car was a parade of humiliation. Ricketts marched Marcus out of his backyard, down his driveway, and onto the street. Neighbors were coming out now, drawn by the shouting. Mr. Henderson, from across the street, a retired mail carrier, stood on his lawn mouth, agape. Marcus, Mr. Henderson called out. What's going on? Just watch Jim, Marcus shouted back, holding his head high despite the pain. Just watch what they do. Ricketts shoved Marcus against the hood of the patrol car. The metal was hot from the sun, burning Marcus's cheek. Ricketts patted him down aggressively, his hands searching pockets, sliding down legs, invading every inch of privacy Marcus had left. He pulled out Marcus's wallet keys and a handkerchief. He threw them on the hood of the car with disdain. Get in, Ricketts said, opening the back door and pushing Marcus's head down. The back of the police cruiser was a hard plastic shell smelling of vomit and disinfectant. As the door slammed shut, sealing Marcus inside, the silence returned. But it wasn't the peaceful silence of his garden. It was the silence of captivity. Marcus closed his eyes, ignoring the throbbing in his ribs, and focused on one thought. They messed with the wrong man. Ricketts climbed into the front seat. He adjusted his rearview mirror to look at Marcus. He didn't look worried. He looked annoyed, like he had to take out the trash. He picked up his radio. One in custody, Ricketts said casually, en route to booking. He had no idea that he had just signed the end of his career. The holding cell was a gray box devoid of time and hope. It smelled of old sweat and despair. Marcus sat on the cold concrete bench trying to find a position that didn't aggravate his fractured rib. His wrists were bruised and swollen where the cuffs had bit into the skin. Every time he took a deep breath, a sharp pain radiated through his chest, a constant reminder of Officer Ricketts's knee. He had been processed like a common criminal. Fingerprinted, mugshot taken, belts and shoelaces removed. The dehumanization was systematic and efficient. For 30 years, Marcus had been a pillar of his community, a deacon at his church, a volunteer coach, a taxpayer who never missed a deadline. In here, he was just a number. While Marcus sat in the cell, Officer Ricketts sat at a desk in the bustling squad room typing out the narrative that would justify his actions. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for his creativity. Ricketts knew how to play the game. He knew the keywords that triggered protection from the union and the department. He typed, "Upon arriving at the scene regarding a disturbance, I observed a male subject in the backyard acting erratically. When approached, the subject assumed a bladed stance and became verbally aggressive." Ricketts took a sip of his coffee. He continued typing. Subject refused multiple lawful commands to show his hands. Subject reached for a sharp metal object, gardening shears, in a threatening manner. Fearing for my safety, I drew my weapon and ordered compliance. Subject lunged toward me. I utilized a standard takedown maneuver to neutralize the threat. Subject resisted arrest by tucking his arms and kicking at the officer. It was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of fabrication. In Ricketts's version, he was the hero holding the line against a dangerous maniac. He printed the report, signed it with a flourish, and handed it to the desk sergeant. He felt no guilt. In his mind, the report was just paperwork, a formality to wrap up the day. Who were they going to believe, a decorated officer or an angry suspect? Back in the cell, Marcus heard the heavy clank of the door unlocking. A guard stepped in. "Thorne, lawyer's here." Marcus stood up slowly, wincing. He was led into a small consultation room where a man in a sharp charcoal suit was waiting. Mr. Sterling was 60, white-haired, and possessed a mind like a steel trap. He had been the Thorne family's attorney for estate planning, but he knew criminal law and, more importantly, he knew civil rights. "Marcus," Sterling said, his face hardening as he saw the bruising on Marcus's wrists and the way he held his side. "Sit down. Brenda called me. She's hysterical, but she's smart. She sent me the video." "You saw it?" Marcus asked, his voice raspy. "I saw everything," Sterling said, opening his briefcase and pulling out a yellow legal pad. "I've already read the preliminary police report Ricketts filed. Marcus, the difference between what he wrote and what is on that video isn't just a discrepancy. It's a felony." Marcus leaned back, relief washing over him for the first time in hours. "He said I lunged at him, didn't he?" "He said you lunged. He said you brandished the shears. He said you kicked him." Sterling looked up, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. "We aren't just going to get these charges dropped, Marcus. We are going to peel that department apart like an onion. But first, we get you out of here. I've already arranged bail. We're walking out that door in 20 minutes. "I want his badge, Sterling," Marcus said quietly. "I don't care about the money. I want that man off the street before he kills someone." "We'll get the badge," Sterling promised. "And we'll make the city pay for every second you sat in this cell." 3 weeks later, the atmosphere in the district attorney's office was not one of prosecution, but of panic. The charges against Marcus Thorne, obstruction and resisting arrest, had not yet been dropped, but they were hanging by a thread. Mr. Sterling sat at one end of a long mahogany table. Next to him sat Marcus, dressed in a suit, looking dignified despite the healing rib. On the other side sat the assistant district attorney, ADA, a woman named Harper, and the city attorney, a man named Vance, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Officer Ricketts was not present. "We have reviewed the officer's report." ADA Harper began, her tone defensive. "Officer Ricketts maintains that Mr. Thorne was non-compliant and presented a threat." "Officer Ricketts is a liar," Sterling said calmly. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply placed a USB drive on the table. "I assume you've seen the footage from Mrs. Thorne's cell phone." "We have," Vance admitted, shifting in his seat. "It shows a chaotic scene. It's open to interpretation." "Interpretation?" Sterling laughed dryly. "Let's try another angle. You haven't released the Bodycam footage yet. You've been stalling, but we obtained it through discovery this morning." Sterling tapped his laptop. A large screen on the wall flickered to life. The video was high definition. It showed the view from Ricketts's chest. The video played. The sound of the gate latch rattling, the unprovoked entry, the view of Marcus standing calmly by his flowers. The audio was crisp. "I don't need a warrant," Ricketts's voice on the recording was arrogant, dismissive. Then came the critical moment. The report claimed Marcus lunged. The video showed Marcus standing perfectly still, hands open. It showed Ricketts closing the distance. It showed Ricketts attacking a stationary man. But the damning part, the smoking gun, came after the arrest. On the video after Marcus was in the car, Ricketts was walking back to his own vehicle. He thought the interaction was over. He was breathing hard. He muttered to himself, clearly audible on the microphone. "Old guy wants to be a lawyer, teach him a lesson." The room went silent. The malice was undeniable. It wasn't fear for safety. It was punishment for disrespect. Sterling paused the video. The image frozen on the screen was Ricketts's reflection in the patrol car window, looking smug. "That," Sterling said, pointing at the screen, "is premeditated deprivation of rights under color of law. That is assault. That is filing a false police report. And that," Sterling looked directly at the city attorney, "is why you are going to write a very large check." Vance rubbed his temples. He knew the case was unwinnable. If this went to a jury with a sympathetic older victim and a young, arrogant officer caught lying in 4K resolution, the city would be destroyed. The jury would hate Ricketts. "What do you want?" Vance asked quietly. "First," Sterling said, "all charges against Mr. Thorne are dismissed with prejudice immediately. Second Officer Ricketts is terminated, not suspended. Terminated. And third, we are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit for unlawful search, seizure, excessive force, and malicious prosecution." "We can settle the civil suit," Vance said quickly. "Avoid the circus." "We can," Sterling agreed. But the price just went up. Marcus watched the lawyers haggle. He felt a grim satisfaction. The truth was a powerful thing, but only when it was recorded. He thought about how many men like him 30 or 40 years ago didn't have cameras. How many sat in cells or lay in graves because a man like Ricketts wrote a report that no one could disprove. The settlement talks were ongoing, but the procedural wheels required a deposition. This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. It wasn't a courtroom, but it was a room where Officer Ricketts had to answer questions under oath recorded by a stenographer. Ricketts sat across the table. He looked different without the sunglasses and the hat. He looked smaller, younger. He wore a cheap suit that didn't fit well. His union rep sat next to him, looking bored. Sterling began the questioning. He was surgical. "Officer Ricketts, in your report, you stated Mr. Thorne lunged at you. You used that specific word, correct?" "Yes," Ricketts said, his voice tight. "That was my perception at the time." "Your perception," Sterling repeated. "Let's watch the video at timestamp 14:05. Sterling played the clip. Marcus stood like a statue. Ricketts tackled him. "Officer, can you point to the moment in this video where Mr. Thorne lunges?" Ricketts stared at the screen. He swallowed hard. It happened fast. The angle might not show it." "The angle is from your own chest, officer," Sterling snapped. "If he lunged at you, he would be getting larger in the frame. He is not. You are moving toward him. You lied in your report, didn't you?" "I did not lie. I wrote what I felt." "You felt." Sterling leaned in. "Did you feel the Constitution when you walked through a closed gate without a warrant?" "I had probable cause," Ricketts mumbled. "Name it," Sterling demanded. "Name the suspect. Name the specific noise. Name the statute that allows you to enter a private backyard for a noise complaint that didn't exist." Ricketts stayed silent. He looked at his union rep, who shook his head slightly. There was no way out. "You entered that yard because you saw a black man in a nice house and you assumed you had the right to be there," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a gravelly low. "And when he told you to leave when he knew the law better than you couldn't handle it. Isn't that the truth, Kyle?" "I was doing my job," Ricketts whispered, but the defiance was gone. He looked defeated. He knew the video had stripped him naked before the law. Sterling sat back. "No," You were breaking the law, and now you're going to pay for it. The deposition lasted 4 hours. By the end, Ricketts's credibility was in shreds. He had contradicted himself a dozen times. He had admitted he didn't have a specific description of a suspect. He admitted he was angry. When they walked out of the room, Vance, the city attorney, pulled Sterling aside. $510,000, Vance said. That's the number. We settle today. Ricketts is turning in his badge tomorrow. The chief is firing him for conduct unbecoming and falsifying records. Sterling looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded slowly. It wasn't about the money. It was about the erasure of Ricketts' authority. We accept, Sterling said. The news cycle moved fast. The headline ran in the local paper and on the evening news, City settles for $510K in warrantless entry case, officer fired. The check arrived 2 weeks later. It was a piece of paper that represented vindication, but it couldn't fix the rib that still ached when it rained or the way Marcus's heart skipped a beat now whenever a car door slammed outside. Ricketts was gone. The department had cut him loose to save face. Rumor had it he was working security at a mall in the next county, stripped of his power, just another civilian in a uniform that commanded no respect. It was a Sunday afternoon, months after the incident. The seasons had changed. The heat of summer had given way to the crisp gold of autumn. Marcus stood in his backyard. The hydrangeas had faded, replaced by fallen leaves that needed raking. He held the rake in his hand, the wood familiar and grounding. He looked at the gate. He had installed a heavy-duty padlock on it the day after he got out of jail. It was a physical barrier, but the psychological breach remained. Brenda came out onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. She walked down the steps and stood beside him. She didn't say anything. She just rested her hand on his arm. "It's quiet," Marcus said, looking at the fence line. "It is," Brenda replied. "It's ours again." "Is it?" Marcus asked. He looked at the spot on the grass where he had been tackled. The grass had grown back, covering the scar on the earth, but he could still see it. "I look at this yard, and I don't just see my home anymore. I see a battlefield. I see how fragile it all is. You think you're safe because you follow the rules. You think the walls protect you, but they don't. Only the truth protects you. And sometimes, not even that." "But we won, Marcus," Brenda said softly. "You stood up. You didn't let him break you." "We won because you held that camera," Marcus said, turning to look at his wife. "If you hadn't been there, if it was just my word against his." He let the sentence hang in the air. They both knew the ending of that story. He took a sip of the coffee. It was hot, bitter, and good. He took a deep breath of the cool air. The settlement money would pay off the mortgage. It would help the grandkids with college. It was a pound of flesh from the system. Marcus walked over to the gate. He checked the padlock. It was secure. He turned back to his castle, his sanctuary. It was damaged, yes. The memory of the violation would always ghost around the edges of the property. But he was still here. The intruder was gone. He picked up the rake and began to clear the leaves, reclaiming his land one stroke at a time. The rhythm of the work was healing. Scrape, scrape, scrape. He was Marcus Thorne. This was his home, and he wasn't going anywhere. The silence of that backyard speaks louder than the shouting that disturbed it. Marcus Thorne's story is a victory, yes, but it is a victory that shouldn't have been necessary. A man's home is supposed to be his castle, not a place where he has to fear the very people sworn to protect him. The $510,000 settlement pays the bills, but it cannot buy back the innocence of a sunny afternoon lost to fear. It reminds us that our rights are like muscles. If we don't exercise them, and if we don't defend them with vigilance and evidence, they atrophy. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have been able to keep your cool while being arrested in your own garden? Let me know in the comments below. If you believe in holding authority accountable, please like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice. Stay safe and know your rights.